Aloha, and thanks for tuning in for part 3. In this video, we were wrapping up to the end of our first segment of the workshop, so there was a lot more questions and answers happening from the audience and sharing information that would be helpful to the rest of the group. So in this video, you see a lot more of the audience participation, and we also go into a deeper dive about biochar, Humanure, fertilizer in general, and pest and animal control. So tune in, and I hope you enjoy it. Thank you.
We touched on it kind of like ash and stuff like that, and I really like that you guys were saying that, like, if you just burnt everything down to ash, that energy is like mostly gone in the air.
Right.
Of course, ash is good for plants, but if you cut down all your trees, burn it all to ash, you're getting way less biopotential out of it.
All the carbon left.
It's gone,
Yeah.
and it's tiny, and it's just going to wash away.
But
Totally.
it's quick what will be absorbed.
Right.
If you're starving, I guess, burn your trees down and grow some radishes or something.
That's what we tell people. If you're already starting a fire and like do bonfires or you cook over a fire, then by all means. But even better is if you extinguish the wood while it's still charcoal, because then you've got biochar, and that's the best. And if you guys have biochar, what you need to know about it is that it's negatively charged and it needs to be charged. It's looking for the positive ion to bond to. So if you don't pre-charge it with like urine or manure, comfrey tea, something, it's gonna absorb those positive ions out of your soil. So you want to just pre-charge it.
Something with a lot of nitrogen is what you're saying?
Yeah.
A lot of
And
NPK.
nutrients.
For how long you think? For how many days?
Honestly, a week is best,
week,
but even
yeah.
a day is
Just in a bucket. Just
Yeah.
keep it in a bucket.
Yeah.
When you have biochar, the carbon. Okay, so this mulch pile, a lot of the carbon is going to be breathed out by the fungi, just like we breathe out carbon dioxide. Fungi eat carbohydrates and breathe out carbon dioxide. So a lot of this is going to be actually just gone. Some of it will stay as soil. When you have biochar, it really locks that carbon into this solid form that can be there for thousands of years. So biochar actually builds some of the best soil in the world. If you look at the terra preta in South America, it's this mysterious black soil in the Amazon. And the Amazon is like here, they get so much rain that the nutrients are constantly getting washed out. So all the nutrients are in the trees, but they find these terra preta patches where the soil can be farmed for over and over again and it still somehow recovers. And how it was built is basically mixing Humanure with biochar and mulch. So definitely, if you have biochar, charge it up with your Humanure or something, and it's going to lock that carbon in for thousands of years.
So, for this example, it would be good to charge up your biochar and put it over or put it under the mulch?
I would
say
say
under
put
the
them
mulch,
in
yeah.
the
Okay,
soil
cool.
mix is
Yeah.
even better.
Nice.
Like around this area, because this is all the roots are right here for now.
Gotcha.
And then as the tree gets bigger, you start spreading the nutrients further and further from the trunk.
Okay.
So we've heard
They love
for every
horse poop.
every pound of manure you give to a banana, it'll give you a pound of fruit. So basically, it's like the more you put into it, it gives you immediate results, and the more you get out of it, right? And yeah, definitely. What's that?
So that's a pretty fair exchange.
Yeah, totally. It's good. It's a good practice tree. It actually needs more nutrients than most fruit trees. So it's good to practice with because you can see the immediate results of like, oh my gosh, I peed on this, and then a week later there's a big, beautiful new leaf. You know.
I
So
recently read though that too much worms in like a forest environment is bad because worm castings are higher pH and forests prefer lower pH.
I don't know if that's accurate here because we already have such a low pH here. I think the worm castings might actually be helping remediate that pH and make it more.
yeah, sometimes the pH here is like 4.5. That's like pretty darn acidic. Like that's not good. And worm castings, the red wigglers have bacteria in their gut that are feeding the soil. So yeah, red wigglers are pretty awesome.
Yeah, they actually have a neutral pH.
Another thing I wanted to mention is, so like I'll chip guava trees, ohia trees, albizia, like a lot of different trees. And every few months I'll throw tons of Mexican sunflower through it. And I found that like Mexican sunflower, I think it just has the perfect ratio of wood to greenery.
Yeah.
Because again, like any place that I've put a pile of Mexican sunflower wood chips, again, it never compacts. Like like
Totally.
months and months later, I can still go there and it's super fluffy.
Are you
It might
using
over the-
black cinder with
it-
your?
No, just all the worms. Like the first few days, it's like tons of black soldier fly larvae and like a lot of action. But then 6 months, 7 months later, it's still just tons of red wrigglers.
It will
Super
eventually
fluffy.
compact. We do have a client who, you know, we did a consultation with him. We were like, you got to use black cinder. He was like, cool. And then he didn't. He was like, I'm just using wood chips. I don't need it. And for the first year in planting in just wood chips, everything did amazing. And then after that, it just turned to gluggy mud.
Because the
And-
wood chips broke down into soil, and
Right.
without the cinder in there, it became just your local soil, which is really fine particles. And now he had to pay us to come in, and we're remediating his beds and adding black cinder 2 years after their creation.
So the mulch is great, but a layer of at least a few inches of black cinder at the bottom is going to be everything. And then the mulch, as it turns into soil, the rain washes it down, and then it filters down and makes this beautiful cinder soil mix. So it's like kind of like this stuff, but all you use was the cinder, and then the mulch becomes the soil part.
So I believe it. It's just give it like 2 years. If you're not continuing to add stuff, it's just gonna compact lower and lower as the wood breaks down.
Would you use like effluent from like human waste for fruit trees or?
Absolutely.
Okay, I was just
Yeah.
curious if that was okay because I got a home biogas and we get buckets of the stuff, but I just
Oh
wasn't,
yeah,
I wasn't
yeah.
sure if that was okay with
You know
the
what?
stuff
You
eat.
can even throw your dog shit on a fruit tree. I don't
Okay.
throw it on my tomatoes or my hot peppers
Yeah.
or something where I'm going to be eating it. But a fruit
Okay,
tree
that's
is
good to know.
it's like any manure is good nutrition for a
Yeah.
fruit tree.
Okay.
And
cool.
bananas
I was
too.
kind of hesitant.
Also,
'cause
lime will cook it.
You
Speaking of
can,
food.
you
Yeah,
know, you don't have to if it's going onto a fruit tree because the pathogens aren't going to be like traveling up the tree onto the fruit. You know,
Yeah,
it's
okay,
like they're
fair enough.
always right on the
it's going
ground.
through.
Yeah.
It's getting processed.
Exactly.
Humanure is a huge asset. We tell everyone who has a
Asset.
flushing toilet, we're like, you're wasting.
Thousands
Tons of
of
money.
dollars.
You know,
every
you're
year.
at a huge disadvantage.
That's all in
Versus-
the septic tank.
Yeah, exactly. Like, so we got the city mulch. It comes at like 160 degrees, full of these, you know, hot composting bacteria. So if you have
That's
your
active.
aged Humanure, then you can sandwich it with that hot stuff, and it breaks down super fast. And then just, you know, turn it every once in a while.
Not sludge, but it's
Mhm.
Yeah,
it's
you
a
could
good both.
just layer it,
Yeah.
and it'll break down
It's
super
like a
fast.
liquid form that I get
Yeah.
out of the
Right,
system,
right.
So.
Yeah.
You
Yeah, it's
could
a
just
huge
put it on
asset.
your plants then. You just probably want to
Put
make
on
sure it doesn't
bananas.
burn it.
Bananas can
The
take
bananas.
straight manure.
Okay, so the heaviest feeders of any of your fertilizer is going to be lilikoi, bananas, papaya. And what's the other one?
Chayote.
Chayote, for
Yeah,
sure.
squash,
Squash, right?
taro.
But as far as like, yeah, and taro. So it's like we've met people that they're actually giving up on growing bananas because it takes so much nutrition just to get one awesome rack. So, I mean,
They can take Pete full strength.
Lots of pea.
exactly.
I actually have a flushing toilet that goes into a tank that's oxygenated with just those small fish pumps.
Oh, nice.
You know, to keep the smell down because to create a more
Mhm.
aerobic environment.
Right.
And then I have a spigot at the bottom that goes to a banana patch.
Nice.
So anytime I want to, I just turn the spigot and I get this like poopy water that
Mhm.
goes straight to the banana. And I like 7 or 8 months ago, I planted a 1 keiki. Now it's like
I bet.
probably like tall as this tree, and it
Nice.
has like 7 keikis like shooting.
Totally.
It's like
Nice.
dynamic growth.
I mean, our best banana is the one that's planted in the duck pen that the ducks love to sleep under, and they're like pooping on it all the time.
Same.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like I mean, kind of like what Tony's doing here. Like we planted a food forest in our duck pen because that way the ducks are just fertilizing
I
it
think
and
the
they want to
duck
be
pen's
under
gotta be
shade.
big though, otherwise they just eat everything and they just uproot everything.
Not ducks. More chickens will be like the
They
chickens
scratch.
love mulch piles because there's like worms and stuff in
Yeah.
it. Muscovies mostly eat like young tender green leaves. They're kind of like geese. Yeah, they're kind of like geese. So they'll eat some sweet potato. They'll eat comfrey, cassava leaves, but they won't really a full-grown fruit tree. They're not going to touch it. If they're hungry, they will start wringing the bark.
Yeah.
So that's one thing to know is they won't touch the bark until they get hungry or really bored, or if they're like too many packed in a
Yeah,
small
I
area.
think that I just have too small of a space too.
Yeah,
for them.
you want it to be big enough that they have room to
And
wander.
stuff keeps growing.
Or just fence your stuff in. Like if we have a banana,
That's
we have to
close.
fence in our kekies until they're old enough because our
Yeah.
ducks will eat
That
everyone.
growth.
But that's a Muscovy or a goose thing. I don't think standard mallard Indian runner breeds would eat the leaves like that.
Okay.
And speaking of things that want to destroy your plants, we should talk about pigs. So something that we will use a lot is like, because this is fenced in, like I would use sweet potato on this plant, and then as you're growing this out, this can actually be a garden bed, and that's not going to mess with the fruit tree roots, but that's a pig's favorite
Oh,
thing.
yeah.
So
Everything
if
up.
you don't have a fenced-in area that you're putting this fruit tree in, something like, don't use sweet potatoes as your ground cover, as we found out the hard way. And also, you can get free pallets and just make a pallet box, and that's gonna protect the fruit tree until, like, from the pigs. If you make it a square, then they can be pushing on it from all the directions, and it hopefully won't break unless it's pretty rotten. So, you know, if you once the tree's yay big, I mean, the pigs aren't going to be able to eat it as much. They're more likely to disassemble your mound. In which case,
Sometimes pigs will eat the bark off your tree, especially ulu. So
that's
something to be
true.
aware of.
The
That's
big
true.
rocks can. That's another point. The big rocks can help a lot too.
I've never managed to put a rock down that a pig didn't move. It would have to be like a two-person rock.
Boulder.
Well,
rail-
I,
to-
yeah. Well, I too had an excavator, but
Yeah,
Oh,
that could
yeah,
work.
that'll do it. That'll
That
do
could
it.
work. But even
One
biggest logs
Yeah,
doesn't
one
matter.
hand.
They just move them. So
Oh, and then final thing I was thinking of is, so when we're planting small trees, like the reason why we planted this one here is because it's bigger. And also, you know, you're kind of looking at shade, but your plant is most likely to get burned up and killed by the noon to afternoon sun. So what we'll often do is we will actually use tea leaf or crotalaria. Okay, if we have time and we know that we're going to plant a tree in this area, we would get the mound ready. We would have the Mexican sunflower already grown to be the shade, and then we'd have crotalaria or pigeon pea or something already planted. So those are the nitrogen fixers. But then they're also going to act as sunscreen for the plant. And then you want to plant something that will eventually be the sacrificial lamb that can be cut away from the tree as it gets bigger.
So the Mexican sunflower is perfect for that.
And another thing that you can use is ice cream bean. We don't usually use a ton of ice cream bean in our business. We use it at home because if you are not on top of your ice cream bean, it becomes really woody and then you need a chainsaw to cut it, versus like an albizia, you can break a pretty big branch like just with your hand. Same with Mexican sunflower. But if you're gonna use a tree as a feeder, like if I was gonna plant an ice cream bean to shade this out and also feed this tree, I would plant it at least 5 feet away.
Like right here.
Yeah, perfect. So this
Or like
is gonna
behind
get-
you. There's a nice one behind you.
Yeah, so once this gets big, you're gonna keep chopping. You can chop it all the way to the ground, and then it's gonna have the big root die off, like Daniel was saying. And ice cream bean is a great nitrogen fixer. It puts out way more NPK than like a Gliricidia, Madre de Cacao, or like a Mexican sunflower. It's one of the best nitrogen fixers. It's just that it's really hardy and it can get out of control really fast. So we don't recommend it for people who aren't down to be doing their own chainsawing and, you know.
They're probably the best tree I've ever seen to grow lots of lilikoi and chayote on.
Oh, yeah.
Because they just hold all the weight.
Yes.
Yeah.
And they still manage to put new leaves out
Yes.
while
Right.
like the vines are crawling all over it.
Yeah,
Right.
they're strong.
If you guys
Yeah.
were gonna do the ice cream bean, I would just plant it 5 feet away, and that way, like, it's not gonna compete with the tree, but it's gonna be close enough that when you're cutting it, it's gonna have that plant die off. But also, we're a big fan of just planting all of our mulch that tree needs right in the area, because it sucks to go all the way out and grab all the mulch, wheelbarrow and an off-roading ramp to like try to get it to your plant. So that's why, like, where Tony's already got all this Mexican sunflower ready to go, every time it gets big, he can do exactly what we did already, which is just break it all down, feed it to the tree, and then you've reset it, no problem. Except for, of course, if you need the shade.
Now, if it's a shade-loving plant, then you can mess with having the cut chop and drop plant closer. I've even had planted a kava and a green tea both 6 inches away or less from the Mexican sunflower. So the sunflower is like right up on them, but because they're shade tolerant, you can just let it grow up and overshade that plant, and it's still, even if it's not 100% happy, it's gonna be there. It's gonna be happy, and then when you cut that sunflower or whatever it is back, then it just explodes with growth because of all the roots that died off that it gets access to. And the cool thing is, when you start getting into syntropic agroforestry, that's basically growing lines of mulch crops intermingled with your lines of fruit trees, right? So once the closer I have this sunflower, like let's say this is a sunflower plant right here. Every time I chop that, those roots are dying off. They're going straight to that. Versus if it's way over here, it's not really feeding that plant as much. And it's also just pumping growth hormone to that plant, right? So if you have the time to work on your farm, you can be planting, I'd say you can go more like 2 or 3 feet from a sun-loving plant, and you can go more like a foot for a shade-loving plant. And then the cool thing is, like, let's say pretend this is a rooted plant here. If I mulch it here and I just put it right in place, it actually gets to receive this mulch that it grew. So like it gets access to all this goodness, and it's gonna grow back faster, and it creates a feedback loop of fertility. So basically the sunflower is creating its own soil, which helps it grow back faster, which helps it create more soil, which helps it grow back faster. See what I'm saying?
Taking a bunch of carbon from the air, making it into soil.
Right. Mining this black cinder and turning it into bioavailable nutrients for the other tree.
And then once this becomes brown carbon, it acts, the Joe Salatin term is the carbon diaper. So when you do add chicken manure or some sort of fertilizer on there, then the brown carbon mulch is going to be absorbing that and acting like a slow drip as well.
What do you guys think about plants growing their own, like they're growing what they want themselves, so mulching it with its own stuff?
I think that's true.
That?
I think that's true, but there's sometimes where it's not advantageous. Like, if you have like a citrus gets a lot of diseases, that's one where it's like if you're breaking all the dead growth off of it, I wouldn't mulch it in place because the fungal spores are just going right back to it.
Right.
There's other trees, like if you guys want to try to grow mangoes, there's a few kinds that'll potentially fruit up here. Mangoes fruit heavier with a lack of nitrogen. So or same with lychee, or maybe even longan. Like if you want to induce flowering from those plants, you don't want to give it too much nitrogen because it just puts on a lot of growth. So if you're chopping and dropping, I think we're not necessarily against giving it the nitrogen back, but like for example, we cut some big lychee trees, and they weren't fruiting because they're putting all their energy into the growth of the new flush. So some people, when they trim that, they would take all of those leaves and branches away and not give any back because they're trying to starve it. Personally, I'd rather give the leaves back to the tree and then just prune it again next year.
Right. Well, plus it's very convenient that it's in place.
Exactly. It's just building its own soil.
They want to take everything far away, and then they bring it back, and then and I'm just like, why not just
totally
right where it's at?
As long as it's not diseased.
That makes sense.
So those lychee, they were big logs, and we arranged them in this massive, it was just concentric circles of giant logs, and then we covered it with all the leaves. So it's like, you wouldn't have necessarily been able to tell, but it's like there were huge logs that were underneath all of that, and it's like that can also all be used. It's all useful.
Yep.
Okay, that makes sense with the disease. So if in that case, and if it maybe make a new hugel mound or something.
Exactly.
Yeah, or you could take it
Put
to
it on
a different tree species. Yeah, so citrus disease isn't always going to affect a different kind of tree.
Got it.
Yep.
I like that.
So should we move on to the next tree?
Yeah, so let's go plant another tree.
All right, thanks for tuning in and watching. You can come see us at Maku'u Market. We have a permanent vendor spot now, which is super exciting. So we are always located in the same place. You can come find us down in the plant section in Maku'u Market, almost all the way to the end across from the pop-up tents. We always have a wide variety of edible plants and herbs. So feel free to come by, talk story, see what we have, and check us out. If you want to get a hold of us for any food forest excavation, consultation work, or any of that good stuff, I will leave our information in the description below. So you can feel free to reach out to us via email, Facebook, or Instagram. Until next time, aloha!